I'm steadily being introduced to the joys of adventure biking, and in order to understand them a bit better, I wanted to visit some stalwarts of the class. And to a novice like myself, there are two names that stand out: the BMW GS and Honda's Africa Twin. The BMW I'm still yet to try, but the Honda I managed to tick off last week. We had access to the DCT version, which, to be frank, wouldn't be my first pick, but it did at least provide the answer to an interesting question. Does that automatic gearbox work off-road? Yes and no. And yes, the rider is responsible. Thank you very much. I am very responsible. So one of the hardest things is going to be the fact that I haven't really got an awful lot of engine braking with the automatic gearbox. So if I'm picking up speed and I roll off, it takes a while to bring itself down. Now Rob tells me you can adjust that if you want to, if you so choose, which if you were going to do some off-roading, I'd probably say was a good idea, so that maybe you have a bit more control over that. I'm going to be favouring the rear brake, not really touching the front on this pretty gnarly gravel. Rob thinks drive might be better. I'm going to plump for sport, not because I expect to be picking up some major speed, but because I'd like to keep the revs maybe a little bit higher, instead of it changing gear constantly. Questions? Where should I go? Let's at least have a little look at what's on the left. A few puddles. Nothing to get excited over. Apart from the fact that I'm not really wearing my off-road gear. Okay, well, it's not the easiest thing to turn around either. I know it's not the lightest bike ever. It's about 230 kilograms, I think, for the DCT option, which obviously I'm on. But I don't feel too bad. I mean, it is tall, obviously. So if you miscalculate that and you find something a bit lower with your left foot and overbalance the bike, it's probably going to go down, but it's not unmanageable. I should probably at least try standing up, just to see. For the ergonomics, it's quite comfortable. The only thing, and it is a big thing when you're using the DCT to stand up, is that you haven't got as much control over that throttle hand, and you can't use the clutch just in case you get into a pickle and end up getting bounced backwards, gripping on, and then shooting off when you don't mean to. But it does make it a bit easier, apart from when you hit a little wayward bump. It's good fun. I can see the appeal. As I say, I'm slowly being introduced to the adventure bike class, but for me, the Africa Twin stands out as a pretty foundational machine. It's synonymous with the style. This one is the new 1100 Adventure Sport version with DCT Gearbox. It has 100 horsepower, 77 foot-pounds of torque, and a really appealing soundtrack from that stock exhaust, which for reference sounds like this. Obviously, it's not a light bike. This option carries a little extra heft at 248 kilograms. It's also pretty tall, with a seat height on the day of 850 millimeters. You can add a higher or lower seat option, stretching it between 825 or 895 millimeters if you're a giant. 850 millimeters was actually pretty good for me. Just for reference, I am 5'10" and I could flat foot relatively easily on most terrain. If you find that awkward little hump somewhere and you put your foot down and can't find it, that is a little bit daunting with a bike of this size and weight. Suspension is Showa and is adjustable for preload on the front, preload and rebound on the rear, but you can buy electronically adjustable Showa tricked out suspension if you want. The brakes are good enough. You've got 310mm discs on the front with 4-piston radial mounted calipers, 256 on the rear with a 2-piston caliper. Obviously it has ABS, it also has cornering ABS as well, and you can turn off the ABS on the rear if you're going to take it off-road. It does actually work pretty well. I didn't actually turn off the ABS, but even when it's on, it's very smoothly applied. Sometimes you'll find when it actually engages on other bikes, you get this kind of gravelly feeling, is the only way I can describe it, through your foot. You don't get any of that on this bike, and you can pretty much stomp on it with your full weight without any fear of that rear wheel locking up. which is quite comforting.
I like it when you get into a flow. It's good fun. And you really, really can't lock up that rear, even on gravel. Just won't let you do it. You can put your full body weight on that rear brake and it's not going to lock up with the traction control on. That's not smart, is it? No. Okay then.
It also has a full colour TFT touchscreen display, will support Apple Play and Bluetooth connectivity, and will probably baffle you if you set off the first time without getting the full orientation on it, which is what happened to me. I just went, bike, good, I know what these are, let's go. And then I spent, I'm not proud of it, half an hour looking for the indicators. That frustrated me an awful lot. Much like the Last Crusade's Path of God, it is only visible from certain angles, and you need to just have faith that it exists.
Glad we get to do this little stretch again. Cracking fun. There is one thing I forgot. To adjust the screen. One of the things while riding this and getting to grips with it is that there's an awful lot to play with. Too many switches, and the controls aren't the most intuitive. Points to anyone who can tell straight off the bat without being told whilst sat on the bike where the indicators are. I'll give you a few seconds. Da 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 da. There! Poking underneath the horn, way out of the way, and from this angle, without any form of indication on them, that first of all that's a switch, or second of all, what kind of switch it is. But anyway, once I dialed into it and I started to understand it a bit better, and I found out where the indicators were, I stopped getting distracted by all that stuff and just enjoyed the ride, which for the most part of the start I wasn't able to do. One of the other things I get used to now is that if you're going to overtake stuff or accelerate, I've gotten in the habit of just hovering over that down gear button just to knock it down when setting up for a corner or for an overtake, to give it a little bit more pep when you want to accelerate just a little bit faster. At the start I was holding on to the up and down, and then I realised that actually you wouldn't need the up because it's quite keen to knock it into casual revs whenever it gets the chance, about 2000 if it can in drive mode, a little bit higher if you're in sport. And one of the other things I want to check out is how to set up the cruise control, which on the way up I didn't know how to do, and it's a shame. So I am, if you'll just excuse me, gonna knock it into cruise control, get my speed going, because this isn't the most interesting section of road that I've ever been on, and then get home. Ta-ta everyone, bye for now.
To be honest, it probably was quite a lot to take stock of, and I had quite a few mental adjustments to make when I set off. Second ever automatic gearbox and second ever experience of an adventure bike for me. So let's unpick them separately. First, the 6-speed DCT gearbox. It works reasonably well. Fresh out the packet, you get sport and drive riding modes. For fuel preservation and town riding and boring motorway miles, drive is fine, but for everything else, I'd probably stick it in sport, where it's a lot happier to hold on to higher revs. Useful for overtakes, actually for hills as well. I found it was a little bit lacking in revs and wasn't necessarily that happy when I stuck it in drive. And for cornering exit speed.
I would say at the moment though that automatic gearbox isn't necessarily reading what sort of gear selection I'd be making if this wasn't semi-automatic, and that you almost need 3 modes, so you've got drive, sport, and then, no really, sport. Because it's almost like it doesn't believe me. No, I really do, I want it to be sport, please.
The big question though is whether or not it works off-road, and I would say in stock settings the answer is yes, if you are an average rider like myself. If you're a little bit more competent than I am off-road, which to be fair isn't a hard bar to meet, or you're going to use it for a higher percentage of your time there, or you're going to take it on more challenging terrain, then obviously the manual is the way to go. You'll have more control over it, and it's actually slightly lighter. Of course, if you are going to take this one off-road, then I'd say use their recommended settings, which obviously includes turning off the ABS on the rear and something they call G-switch, which you can access through the dash, which Honda says reduces the amount of clutch slip during gear changes. The other thing for me was finding out whether or not I liked or could ride this kind of bike well. They are nowhere near as daunting as I first suspected they might be, and they offer just as much enjoyment and satisfaction as anything else that I've sat on with just a skosh more comfort. Honda's marketing team describe it as escapism at its peak, and I have to say, they're pretty much on the money. Now, if only I could get one with like clip-ons and a really loud exhaust and like less fairing at the front, maybe a lower seat height. When I stop being vain, then I'll get one. Ain't gonna happen anytime soon.
It's really nice though to find that it's not quite as ungainly or daunting as maybe I thought big, tall, heavy bikes like this were when you get on faster roads. I had an impression in my head that they were a bit too tall and gangly and they wouldn't really handle the undulations that well if you're setting up for corners, make you feel a little nervous if you're not used to them. And actually I think you can get a real hustle on going around some decent bends. It's not perhaps my style of riding, it's not the sort of bike that I'm going to feel most confident on. I still think probably at the stage of life I'm at the moment, adventure bikes, not yet for me, but at least I know how much fun they can be. And I have a much greater appreciation for them now. Having ridden two of the best, you'll still have a cracking day out. And the real point, I think, being as this can go off-road, is that the whole world is open to you. Not just a few choice roads. Great fun.
So if you want to pick yourself up one of these little beauties, they range between £14,649 and £17,349, depending on the optional extras that you choose. And that price is correct as of August 2020, the year that everyone wished didn't exist. Once again, thank you very much for watching. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. If you want to leave a comment, go ahead, thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you in the next one. Ta-ra.